can this come up a little bit?
Good evening and welcome to the July 14th meeting of the City of Kalamazoo Zoning Board of Appeals, a voluntary advisory board appointed by the City Commission. Mr. Eldridge, could we get a attendance roll call?
Yes, we'll start with Turpinning.
Here.
Vanden Hamburg. Here. Lager.
Here.
Carroll.
Present.
Harrington.
Present.
And Purdue. Here.
Public comments will be accepted during the times as indicated on tonight's meeting agenda. Community members that wish to provide public comments over the phone can call 888-382-9556, 888-382-9556 during the public comment period. They will enter a queue and will be prompted to offer their comments in turn. Callers will be commenting to the board live and will no longer be able to leave a recorded message. Are there any announcements or changes to the original agenda?
I have no announcements this evening.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to the acceptance of last month's minutes. Does the board have any changes they would like to propose to the minutes? Very well. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Will there be a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing no desire for discussion, we'll have a voice vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, the same. The minutes from last month have been approved. I will now explain our procedure for tonight's public hearing. For each request, the secretary, who is that tonight? Just so I know. Who is the secretary tonight?
Well, whoever you assigned to be the secretary
All
tonight.
right, let's take a moment here. Do I have a volunteer to be the secretary tonight?
I can do that. I'll do that.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
What do you have to do to be the secretary? Just take notes?
Generally, read the request into the minutes.
Oh, I certainly don't want to do that.
Very well.
Thank you.
Moving on. Thank you, Mr. Lager. I'll now explain our procedure for tonight's public meeting. For each request, the secretary will read the application into the public record. The applicant or representative will have 10 minutes to provide their comments. Following that, the public is invited to step up to the podium, starting with those in favor of the application. They will clearly state their name and address and sign in and present their comments within the 3-minute limit. Following all comments from those who wish to speak in favor of the request, we will invite those who wish to speak in opposition or otherwise comment. Next, any call-in comments will be aired for the board and audience. After this, we will close the public hearing. Once the public hearing is closed, the board will then conduct what's called a finding of fact, where the board states what they feel are the facts of the request. The board must approve the finding of fact. Therefore, the first vote you hear is not a ruling on the request, but on the finding of fact. Then the board discusses the request in order to determine a ruling. The board reserves the privilege to ask questions of persons who have already spoken, even though the public comment portion has been closed. Once discussion is ended, the board will move on to a roll call vote. A board consists of 6 members with 4 votes required to grant a non-use or use variance. Mr. Lager, would you read the first application into the record?
Yes. An application for a variance from provisions of the zoning ordinance has been filed with the Zoning Board of Appeals by Bennett Bellinger of 1014 Mills Street in the Commercial Neighborhood District. The applicant is requesting a use variance from Appendix A, Chapter 4, Section 4.1, to allow the property to be used for light equipment repair, which is defined as repair of automobiles and the sale, installation, and servicing of automobile equipment and parts, but excluding body repairs and painting. Please note that this request will not change the zoning classification of the property. This is a request for variance only regarding the item described above.
Thank you. Will the applicant step up to the podium, sign in, and speak your name slowly for us? And then you have 10 minutes to explain your request.
Yeah, my name is Bennett Bellinger.
Thank you. Who has the finding of fact? Thank you.
Yeah, so my request is to get the zoning variance approved for light equipment repair. The property located at 1014 Mills Street, specifically the commercial building on that property, which is addressed 1029 Lake Street. The building is roughly 1,000 square feet and currently zoned CN-1 for local neighborhood commercial district zoning, which does not allow for automotive business or light equipment repair. The building is pretty purpose-built for an automotive type focused business. It's got 2 garage bay doors and a front waiting room, which is relatively small. So other than working on an automobile or the garage bay doors, it would be very difficult to repurpose that building for any other purpose, as well as very cost prohibitive as well. I do have support letters or petitions from neighboring properties and business owners on that corner, since it is located right at the corner of Lake and Mill Street. And yeah, I guess that's kind of what we're requesting, is just the approved variance for the light equipment repair to be added and allowed in that facility.
Thank you. Do board members have questions of the applicant?
Mr. Bellinger, have you owned this property for a while now, or is this a new acquisition?
I acquired the property about 2 years ago.
And do you know, I mean, it seems like a business has been operating in there. And what's the nature of that business that's in there?
Yeah, so the current person that's in there,
I don't
No.
think it's on.
I need to press.
That's better, thank you.
There we go. Yeah, so I was notified by the city that the business in there is not in compliance with the current zoning, hence why we're requesting this use variance. So I've been working with Pete to get this on the schedule for you guys.
And it sounds to me like there are other car businesses that are already operating on that corner.
Yes, there is an auto shop, kind of kitty corner diagonally on that corner, and then directly across the street there is a car wash called The Wash that is directly across the street on Lake Street from that business.
Do you know, are the nature of those car businesses more intensive, less intensive, about the same as what the business on your property will be?
The actual automotive shop, I would say, is more intensive. The current tenant there is like an car audio and security systems and those sorts of things. So it's very, I would say, light duty as far as automotive work goes. It's not brakes, tires, exhaust, those sorts of things. It's accessories that you would add to your vehicle electronics.
And wait, so you're saying that's what will be in the business on your property?
Correct.
It's less intensive. Okay, that's what I understood. Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Are there other questions?
Is this the business right next door to Mill Street Market? Or is it across the street?
It's diagonal.
Diagonal?
Yes.
It's, what color is it?
It's white, but
Yeah.
the car wash across the street from Mill Street Market is also a white building. So it's the white building with an awning that you can park underneath of.
That's what I thought, this building, yeah. This is your business?
I own the property, but I lease that building out to a local business owner. Yes.
And you're saying that they're out of compliance, and so you had to come before us today?
Correct. So
Okay.
we're trying to remedy
That's
that,
what
that issue.
Thank you. All right.
Other questions? Thank you. You can be seated. Now, those in favor are invited to speak at the podium. Seeing none, those opposed are invited to speak at the podium. Seeing none, might there be staff comments?
Yeah, yes, we can do staff comments first, or we can do any call-in.
Oh, I apologize. I do have those notes here. Are there any callers?
No callers at this time.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Eldridge. Could we have the staff comments?
Well, I didn't buy myself much breathing room, did I? So just some background here. So Mr. Bellinger contacted the zoning inspector after being notified that, that the use wasn't permitted in the zone district, and that, basically the option to put the building back into active use was a use variance. So we talked about it. I went out there and met with Mr. Bellinger on site and the business owner. I walked through the building. There has been activity on and off at that building over the last, 5 years, but it's not been legal by the city. There's been, folks that have been, setting up, short-term businesses there. So anyways, this was a refreshing change, for us to be able to do a walkthrough of the building, look at the situation. There is a restroom in the building, as well as a little lobby area, and then, of course, the 2 garage bays. It will need some barrier-free or ADA compliant upgrades to the building, and Mr. Bellinger has reached out to our staff that administers the facade improvements. My understanding is that money can go towards other site improvements as well. So this building has the opportunity to be put back into active use and get some renovation at the same time. So it was already covered that there is another existing business that is similar to this on that same little neighborhood commercial area. It's across the street behind the market, and that one is East Lake Street Auto. The business owner that's looking to move into this particular building is focused more on car audio, but the variance is to allow for light equipment repair. So if this individual moves out in a few years, then there's other opportunities to have light equipment repair type businesses located in this building. The one thing we talked about on the site was keeping the repair work going on within the building. as this is a commercial neighborhood zone district, so it's a low-intensity commercial zone. And, with that, I did mention in the staff report there was a prior use variance granted for the same commercial area. It's related to the grocery store / cafe that's going to open up soon, and that one is, actually, what is that? That's 1116 Mill Street. So there is, this is a quite active commercial intersection here. And it's looking back at the strategic vision, this proposal tonight does touch on economic vitality and complete neighborhoods, having car service businesses in the neighborhood, provides another service for the local residents. This also is an opportunity for a local business owner to live and work in the city of Kalamazoo, and that's a big plus. As was mentioned, there was a petition of support that was signed by 5 residents. There were 2 other letters received that were in opposition, and there was not any other correspondence that came in. Staff's recommendation is to approve the variance because this is a small-scale commercial use in an existing building that's only 1,000 square feet, so we're not going to have a larger operation going on here. It's just that the site won't accommodate that. Other things that will happen is that we've already looked at the parking. The parking is ample for this sort of use. There's 6 parking spaces on the site. As I mentioned, the building will be reviewed, and ADA standards will have to be met as far as wheelchair access into the building, and the bathroom will have to be renovated. And those are things that will that the planning and building staff will work with the applicant on. But other than that, this low-intensity commercial use, would be a good fit for that commercial neighborhood zone.
Thank you much. Is there a motion for a finding of fact?
I can do that too. I make a motion for the granting of a variance.
Oh, my apologies. This is the finding of fact.
Oh, finding of fact, I'm sorry.
Usually you're keeping me straight.
Thank you,
jumped the
Beth.
gun.
Thank you, Beth.
I move that the finding of facts shall include all information included in the notice of public hearing dated June 29th, 2022, and the agenda packet staff provided for this request at 1014 Mill Street. 96 notices of public hearing were sent, and 3 responses were received, and they are as follows. A petition in support was received with 5 property owner signatures. A letter of opposition was received from Renee Brown at 1013 Garden Street. A letter of opposition was received from Janet Germain at 1012 Lake Street. Mr. Bennett Bellinger is requesting a use variance as he would like to use his property for light equipment repair, excluding body repairs and painting. The applicant mentioned the following regarding unnecessary hardships and special circumstances. The current business is out of compliance, and he is looking to rectify that situation. It's very difficult to attempt to repurpose this building as anything other than an auto service provider, because the first building was built for the intention of auto service back in 1935. With regard to the purpose and intent of this ordinance, it was mentioned that light automotive accessories, electronic, the type of work that he's looking to do in the building is less intensive. than other auto service providers. And there are other auto service-related businesses in the area, such as a car wash, that would be in alignment with what the applicant is attempting to do. Mr. Bellinger will also be implementing American with Disabilities Act standards regarding access and the restroom facilities to the building. And I conclude.
Very well. Is there a second to the motion of finding of fact?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye,
Aye.
and those opposed the same. The motion of finding fact passes. Will there be a motion regarding the pending application?
I make a motion for the granting of a use variance from Appendix A, Chapter 4, Section 4.1, to allow the property to be used for light equipment repair.
Is there going to be a second for this motion?
I second the motion.
Thank you. Now we shall have a discussion period. Board members can express support or opposition based on all of the variance criteria to be met. Are there any board discussion points?
So I'm going to be in favor of granting this variance. I think that what I find persuasive here is that the special circumstances here are that the building was custom built for an auto repair business or some sort of auto business. I think the fact that on a four-corner intersection that two of the businesses already have automotive businesses, it seems arbitrary that the zoning would prohibit this automotive business.
Thank you. Any other discussion points? Hearing none, Mr. Eldridge, can I have a roll call vote?
We'll start with Turpinning,
Yes.
Vanden Hamburg,
Yes.
Lager,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
Harrington,
Yes.
Purdue.
Yes.
Your request has been approved. Thank you. Mr. Lager, would you read this next application into the record?
Yes.
For Frank Street.
An application for a variance from provisions of the zoning ordinance has been filed with the Zoning Board of Appeals by Bogan Developments LLC for 315 East Frank Street in the Live Work 1 district. The applicant is requesting a dimensional variance from Chapter 50, 5.6 of 17 feet to allow up to a 27-foot setback from the required 0 to 10-foot front build to requirement for the primary building facade. Please note that this request will not change the zoning classification of the properties. This is a request for variance only regarding the item described above.
Thank you. Will the applicant step to the podium, sign in, and provide your name slowly for us? And then you have 10 minutes to explain your request.
Let me lower this down a little bit. Good evening, board members. I first want to say thank you to Pete and staff for working really closely with our development team to ensure we get here today.
Please let me interrupt you. Could I get your name, sir?
My name is Jamari Bogan. I'm the CEO of Bogan Developments.
Thank you.
I was going to get to that.
My apologies.
But yeah, we're developing the site 315 East Frank Street. We will be bringing 14 units. I know the packet says 9, but it will be 14 units. One of those will be a child care center in partnership with the YMCA of Greater Kalamazoo. And then it will also be 13 residential units that will be mixed income. So we're really excited about what we're going to bring to the Northside community. This piece of land has been vacant for years, and a lot of excitement is starting to build over there, and we're really, really excited to be a part of it. And so I'm going to let Alex from Hurley and Stewart talk about the variance here today.
Thank you.
Good evening, board members. Thank you for your time. Alex Phelan with Hurley and Stewart. So I am a civil engineer, project manager at Hurley and Stewart. We have been working with Jamari for over the last year, I believe it has been, on this development. So back in 2021, we had worked with the city to rezone the property. So we had rezoned the property from a manufacturing zoning designation over to your live work 1 designation. And part of that live work designation is that you build buildings right up on the right of way. So it's up against the road. And we have every intention of doing that. However, when we surveyed the property, we found that there was an error in the survey. So let me go here. So this is the survey here. So typical right-of-way is 33 feet on each side of the road, so 66 feet wide. And I now realize that you can't see my screen.
We can.
Oh, you can, in front of me, okay. Good. All right, so the 2 red lines, they're highlighting the right-of-way in that area. And as you can see on this blow up here, it's actually only 22.5 feet wide. So this is something that was platted back in the 1800s or whenever, and it, for some reason, had this error where it's not the full 33 feet on that side of the road. So as we were going through our development with the city, going through site plan review, one of the requirements was that we bring the road up to the standard road cross section. So obviously 22.5 foot wide would not fit your standard 24 foot wide road. And that's really the heart of this request and the problem that we're having. So this first slide here, it is in order of your standards. So this is the first standard. I don't think you need me to read each standard, but so this is that the right-of-way is too narrow and that we obviously can't fit a road in it. So this is standard number 2. So this is where the issue is. So you can see here that we've got parking up against the road there. So we've got our 24-foot wide road, right? And we've got parking on that. And then we've got sidewalk on top of that. And that's why it's pushing our buildings further away and why we need that variance. But from this, you can see the buildings are actually technically what it would look like if the right-of-way were correct. So this is where we are hoping to grant an easement to the city. So an easement is a little bit different than right-of-way. It will function exactly the same way as right-of-way, but it's still not technically right-of-way. So our hope is that we'll grant this easement to the city. It'll function as right-of-way, and then our buildings will be within that 10 foot of the easement area. And that's why we're here today, is because we're not 10 foot to the right-of-way, we're 10 foot to the easement, and that's what's causing the issue.
May I interrupt?
Absolutely.
Is this image the image you intend to build, or the previous image?
So this is what we are planning to build.
Okay.
So the yellow are 2 buildings, or 3 buildings. It's the apartments that Jamari was talking about. The one on the left is a mixed-use building, so it's apartments and also a daycare.
And the pink is not parking, it's easement and will be landscaped.
Yes. Yep.
Thank
So
you.
there's the pink area is what we are dedicating as right-of-way. So that'll be dedicated. It'll be an easement given to the city. It'll function exactly like right-of-way. It'll give those city all the same rights to that for the most part. And then the buildings are within that 10 foot that's required in your live work 1 district.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So there are 2 ways to correct this. So the first way is going back and replatting the properties to correct the error. The replat process goes through the state of Michigan. It is a very, very difficult process. Even a new plat, so out in a farm field, a plat, it can take up to several years to do, and that's if you own all the property around it, right? I don't believe Mr. Bogan owns all the property that surrounds the entire plat, so you would have to get all the property owners in that plat to be on the same board or same page. Obviously that's a huge undertaking. So discussion with the city was that the most minimum action would be to establish an easement in lieu of going and replatting the property. All right, so on the left here, this is a picture of the actual road. So that is Pitcher Street.
Is that bigger on the right-hand side? No?
Might be the biggest he could actually make it.
I don't know how to do
That's
that.
the, okay.
I'm sorry. Okay, so on the left-hand side, that is the actual road. So obviously it needs to be improved, right? It's very difficult to get 2 cars down there. It's very difficult to get any kind of fire truck apparatus down there. And that's what the city is requesting us to do, is to improve that road, turn it into a real road, put on-street parking on it like what the city wants, have sidewalks so that residents are able to commute throughout the city without having to use cars. And so the goal is to really make this road better, which obviously is not going to adversely impact anybody. It should hopefully improve all those properties, because now there's a standard access point where safety vehicles can get into those properties. The right side is just a clip of kind of what the vision is. That's one way, obviously, that's the mall. But to improve the road, have on-street parking and pedestrian access. So, as I've said, our goal is to meet the intent of your live-work zone, to build the buildings right on the right-of-way like you want, within that 0 to 10 foot. Technically, though, as I've said, the right-of-way is really in the road, so it doesn't make it feasible to actually build within what's required. So our hope is that we're meeting that intent of what you guys are looking for. And then this is just a summary of everything that we've gone through. This matches very closely to what's in the staff report as well. So happy to answer any questions if you have them for us.
Alex, what organization are you with again?
I am with Hurley and Stewart. We're a civil engineering firm here in Kalamazoo.
Thank you.
When it comes to reconstructing the street in front of it, the road there, is it the full segment that's being reconstructed, or just a partial adjacent to the development?
Yes, so let me back up. So what you see here is the area that's getting improved. So the stuff that's owned by Mr. Bogan is where we're improving. So anywhere you see that gray hatch, that is where the road is going to get brought to today's standard road.
Okay, thank you.
And we're actually also going to do Myrtle. So we're going to do the beginning of North Pitcher and Myrtle. And because of our investment inside of the right-of-way there, you're going to see the city actually put dollars into redeveloping the rest of the street. So our investment has now triggered the city's investments.
Great, thank you.
I mean, is it your responsibility to do that, or is it the city's responsibility to do that?
Fine, we want to build a project.
I just-
Are there questions of the applicant from the board? Hearing none, thank you. Now those in favor of the request are invited to speak at the podium. I don't see anybody wanting to speak in favor. Those opposed are welcome at the podium. Might we have any phone comments?
No callers at this time.
Very well. Administrator Eldridge has had plenty of time for this one.
Well, I will keep this brief. I mean, the focus of this dimensional variance request is a setback issue, and as the applicant mentioned, this this hardship is born not out of anything the applicant did or the city did. It is essentially a platting error that once discovered, it was realized that the right-of-way width was not adequate for the public utilities, the on-street parking, and the public sidewalk. So a solution had to be determined, and, you know, the city, through the Site Plan Review Committee and Public Services, you know, they agreed with the suggestion to go with the easement. So the easement idea is what the city's suggestion is to resolve the situation. And the reason that this then brings it before the board is because the building setback definition is from the property line to the closest point of the structure. And so that actual property line does not change with the establishment of this easement. So that's why the measurement, the technical measurement from the front property line to the building at the greatest extent is going to be 27 feet. But as the developer and Mr. Phelan from Hurley and Stewart mentioned, you know, the visual appearance will not look anything outside the normal because of the building being within that essentially 10 feet of the sidewalk that's going to sit in the easement. So other than that, I do just want to briefly touch on you know, the goals of the strategic vision and how this property, so it's in the staff report, but just for the general public's knowledge, this is a brownfield site that the city has been working to redevelop and has been working closely with Bogan Development to, you know, to make this project come to fruition. So not only do we have a, you know, a repurposed site that's been cleaned up, we have new businesses, we have new housing planned for this site. So it's, you know, it's a very positive project. So with that being said, staff's recommendation is to grant the dimensional variance given the evident hardship. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the board have any additional questions of the applicant?
I'm still not clear. If it was a planning error, then why is it their responsibility?
Well,
I just don't understand. I'm just asking for,
so this platting error occurred many years ago.
Okay.
And because this site and this stretch of North Pitcher Street essentially has seen very little development, it was not known that there was anything out of the ordinary with the right-of-way for that portion of North Pitcher Street until all the survey work was done. So what was thought to be 66 feet wide is really 22 or 22.5 feet wide and is not sufficient for the, you know, the travel lanes or the utility runs or the placement of the public sidewalks. So that's where, you know, either it has to be replatted to create more right-of-way, or an easement has to be granted so that the city has rightful access and use of that property frontage for the necessary utilities.
Utilities to come through?
Yep.
Okay, and then that informs his setback requirement too?
And yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Very well. Is there a motion of the finding of fact?
Love this. I move that the finding of fact should include all of the information included in the notice of public hearing dated June 29th, 2022, and the agenda packet that the staff has offered at 315 E Frank Street. 29 notices of public hearing were sent out, 0 were received back. There were no public speakers for or opposed, and no call-ins. Jamari Bogan introduced Alex with Hurley and Stewart, the planning developers. So currently, the plating error that was done several years ago has caused a setback issue. 22 is what they have, 24 is needed for a typical, with this easement, the city can go ahead and do their portion of utility enhancement and other investments to the property, allowing for Bogan developers to also go forward. Hurley and Stewart, Alex submitted slides to be reviewed to help explain what the outcome, what the building will look like, and what the offset will look like in the end. The easement can be used as a city right-of-way, and this helped trigger a city, it triggered the city to increase their production of usable space for access for emergency equipment, things of that nature. Two suggestions were given to a solution. Replatting is very difficult and is very time-consuming. This is not amenable to either the city or the applicant. The suggestion by the city and acceptance from the applicant is to use this as a suggested easement of right-of-way to the city for the purposes of including emergency and other laneways. A public hearing was held before the board. There were no inputted results of the 29 out sent. There were no opposition or for, and this is my finding of fact.
Thank you. That was Jeremy's first finding of fact, and it's not an easy task. Nobody up here likes the finding of fact. Thank you very much. Is there a second for that very good finding of fact?
I second.
Thank you very much. All those in favor of accepting the motion for finding of fact, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, the same. The finding of fact has been accepted. Might there be a motion regarding this pending application? Frank.
I make a motion for the granting of a dimensional variance from Chapter 50-5.6 of 17 feet to allow up to a 27-foot setback from the required 0 to 10-foot front build-to requirement for the primary building facade.
Thank you. Is there a second for this?
I'll second.
Thank you. Now we shall have a discussion period where the board can express their support or opposition. And I'll go first. First, I appreciate the slide presentation and how it was married with the variance criteria. You hit those right in a row, and it makes our job a lot easier. I thank you. Second is I love this request. I'll be in favor of it. Because not many of these requests are slam dunk and meet all of the requirements. And this one certainly meets requirement number 2, 5, and 6. It meets all of them in my opinion, but certainly the special circumstances are not the result of the actions of the applicant. The granting of the variance will not adversely affect adjacent land. In fact, in my opinion, it'll improve adjacent land through the development and the work the city will do on top of your work. And second, that's generally consistent with the purpose intent of the ordinance. So I'll be in favor.
I agree, and I'm happy that this development was able to be worked with the city and them providing an additional investment because of their planning error. And I thought that was really awesome as well. So I think this is awesome.
Are there any other discussion points? Hearing none. Mr. Eldridge, could I get a roll call vote?
We'll start with Lager,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
Harrington,
Yes.
Purdue,
Yes.
Kerpening,
Yes.
Vanden Hamburg.
Yes.
The motion in your request has been approved. All righty. Mr. Lager, would you like to read the next application into the record for Alvin Road?
An application for a variance for provisions of the zoning ordinance has been filed with the Zoning Board of Appeals by 3650 Alvin LLC, the Refinery, for 3650 Alvin Road in the Commercial Community District. The applicant is requesting a dimensional variance from Chapter 50-7.2 to allow 32 off-street parking spaces where 7 spaces is the maximum permitted for the retail use. Please note that this request will not change the zoning classification of the properties. This is a request for variance only regarding the item described above.
Will the applicant step to the podium, sign in, and provide your name slowly for us? You'll have 10 minutes.
Tom Farrell.
Tom,
You've got 2 Tom Farrells and an Aaron Farrell.
thank you very much.
We own the property at 3650 Alvan Road. It is known, it's operated as the Refinery, which is a dispensary in Kalamazoo. We have 3.5 acres there. We're only using maybe 20% of it, about 2,000 square feet for our building. We have approximately 700 to 800 customers per day that come into this facility. I believe the city sets up the parking per square foot for average retail or whatever it may be. I don't know, but we don't have enough parking right now. Alvan Road is not lit up. It doesn't have sidewalks. And we've had some security issues with employees coming in and out of work during the nighttime hours, being approached by homeless and others that, gets kind of scary. Anyway, we were out of compliance because we put a gravel parking lot in the back. We have removed it, deconstructed it. We're now back in compliance. And we are asking to improve our own property next door with nice parking lot like what we have right now, paved with lights, for the security of our employees getting in and out of work, and without getting in the way of Alvan Road. If you're familiar with it, it is right off of Sprinkle Road at the 94 Sprinkle Road interstate intersection there. And there is Old Dominion right at the end of the street with semis coming in and out all day long. There's a landscape company, Caney Water, a lot of trucks, a lot of industrial traffic coming in and out. We are now parking on the street. We have 12 employees parking on the street. So with trucks coming in and out, customers parking on the street, it creates some real havoc there. Certainly don't want to have an accident that would hurt someone or anything like that. But I believe that with our retail space, it's generating very good income, all of that. It's good for the city, good for us, good for the customers, but we just need this additional parking for our building. We're asking for 10 additional spaces over and above what we have right now.
Yeah, we just want to add the parking so we can kind of keep the employees safe, get some lighting out there, kind of keep them off of the road, away from any trucks or anything, accidents at night. So
I know there have been some things talked about having one side of Alvan Road being allowed to park on. We heard that, and that kind of scares us to death, because then if you have customers coming in and parking on the wrong side of the road, getting a ticket, they're not going to come back to our place, because they're going to be upset with that. We do not have any businesses around there's no other parking available to our employees. We've searched that out. There's, all of the other companies on Alvan need their parking, and they don't want to give it to us. I think we've received a couple of letters from Old Dominion and Woodman Financial that are in favor of us doing that. I don't know if there's any opposed. I don't believe there are. And like I said, it would improve the area. It's going, don't have the drawing. You may have seen it. We did submit one, but we didn't set up a slideshow for you. Sorry about that.
Thanks. Could I ask a question? I think you said you had 12 employees. I'd heard that at peak times there could be as many as 15.
Yes, yes, there are. And those peak times can last 3 or 4 hours.
And so you had created a parking lot behind the building which worked.
Yes.
That wasn't in compliance. You deconstructed that. People have been parking on the road complaining about the safety issues, and your neighbors have been complaining about you parking on the road.
Yes.
There's no sidewalks or any pedestrian infrastructure whatsoever there.
No.
No.
We have the sidewalk in front of our property, but
Yeah.
that's it.
And there's no lighting on the street. I think Alvan was put in by an old, if any of you remember, Alvan Trucking did that. They went bankrupt years ago. Old Dominion bought it, but then I think the city took over Alvan Street. I don't know how that worked, but the city now.
Currently, during busy times, is there enough parking for your customers in your lot?
The lot fills up, so some of them do park on the road.
Okay, and that's a potential solution for them because you'd be using the across the street parking for employees.
Or anywhere on the street. We're parking on our side of the street for employees now that we've deconstructed that parking lot. So now they're parking on our side of the street. So we have customers, if our parking lot is full, they're parking on the other side of the street and crossing over to come into a building.
The building under the ordinance is only allowed to have 9 spots, but because it was already there, it has more than that as a pre-existing.
Yes.
Correct.
Yep.
How many are?
We did build the building in 2018, 2019. So we bought the property and then built the building.
Okay. All right, very good, thank you.
Are there other questions? Or were you done? Okay, so are there other questions for the applicant?
I have a question, but why are you not aiming for more? Not that I'm encouraging you to pave over Kalamazoo, but if it sounds like you said 700 to 800 customers a day. If I did just an average 8-hour day, that's 100 customers within an hour. Why not more?
Yeah, so we were going to ask for more, but I believe based on the ordinance that
What's the proximity to the nearest public transit stop? Is it pretty far away?
I do not know. I'm assuming that would be Sprinkle Road, but I don't know.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of alternatives to having it car-centric. I believe you have a bike rack out front, correct?
Yep. Are there other questions of the applicants? Thank you. You can be seated. Now those in favor are invited to speak at the podium. I don't see anybody who wants to speak in favor. Anybody who would like to speak in opposition is welcome at the podium. Might there be phone comments?
No callers at this time.
Thank you. Administrator Eldridge, I'm sure you have comments.
Yes, I do have a few comments to make. Board Member Lager covered some of the bases already, but yeah, the history of this site is that it was developed before the changes in the ordinance to the off-street parking requirements. So the site does have 22 parking spaces right now, where that range of 7 to 9 spaces would be, what would be permissible under the current code. So they've already got the 22, and they're looking to add another 10, bringing it up to 32. The calculation is it's one off-street parking space for every 330 square feet of gross floor area. So, the building is of modest size. Obviously, this type of business is more employee, it's more of a heavier focus, I should say, on the number of employees it needs to make it function. From the receptionist to the, those that handle the actual stations and deal with the customers. But there's a number of areas, so to speak, within a retail facility like this. As far as the customer traffic per day, I have driven by the site many times, and I'm not catching these high volume times. There are, quite a few cars in the parking lot with a few spaces available, as well as some cars parked along the street curb. So there, I definitely am seeing cars parked on the street when I drive through there. So there's parking alternatives, as was mentioned. On-street parking is allowed on both sides of this street, Alvan Road. It is a situation where, given the comments provided by the business owners in the area, that, one is the trucking company, Old Dominion Freight Line, Inc., and they identified that they have 20 to 30 tractor trailers that drive down Alvan each day to get to their freight transfer location at the end of the block. The other applicant is an insurance business with a number of employees and customers going in and out of their drive. They both indicated they would, prefer to see this variance granted tonight. However, the city could sign one side of the street, essentially the north side of the street for no parking, and allow just parking on the south side, which would provide for legal parking on just one side and more maneuvering, width for tractor trailer traffic. So there is that alternative, for the board to consider. So as, looking at the circumstances and the conditions, it's difficult to identify that the special circumstances should allow for more parking, given, the excess number of parking spaces that the applicant already has beyond what the code allows, and the fact that there's on-street parking available, to cover that overage when it does occur.
You spoke for too long.
Apparently so. Okay. And so, the criteria, is difficult to apply, because of, the alternative for parking options being readily available out on the site, as well as along Alvan Road. So with that being said, staff is not supporting this dimensional variance request tonight, and I'm available to answer any questions. Thank you.
I have a question. Thank you. You had mentioned that there's alternatives, but the alternative has budgetary items which we don't control, which is city money to do signage. So how do we, if there's an alternative and there's no signage, we say no, are you going to put the signs up? Or how does the ZBA say, we like the alternatives, we don't like the applicant's request? This is in theory, how do we get you to put the signs up?
Well, the planning department would work with the traffic engineer, and the traffic engineer would communicate with the property owners along Alvan Road about, the changes. Signs would have to be installed to make it very clear where parking along the street is allowed and where it is not allowed. So yes, that can happen. I mean, and the reason that I speak so much about the on-street parking is really the intent of the off-street parking regulations is to provide enough, a minimal amount of off-street parking on a site if there's other parking alternatives available in the area. We really want to minimize the amount of asphalt because it adds to the stormwater management, it adds to the heat island effect with all these additional paved surfaces, and then it adds to the expense of managing the commercial property because you've got this asphalt that you've got to resurface every so many years, and you've got a stormwater detention system you've got to maintain. So there's a number of reasons the city is, leaning on less off-street parking is better when there are alternatives available.
So to confirm, I'd hate to vote no on an application hoping the city would do the signage or do the alternative. What is my assurance if I vote no that the off-street parking situation will be changed by the city?
That will be the recommendation that I will take back to the city planner, that the Zoning Board of Appeals suggested we proceed with the review and establishment of on-street parking on just one side of Alvan Road. So,
it seems a little chicken and egg.
It's not a complicated process, and two of the property owners already would prefer to see less on-street parking, and they provided that in writing to the board tonight. So, that would be what the traffic engineer would be looking at, and the traffic engineer would meet with the property owners and establish what new signage would need to be installed.
If an application is denied, is there a time limit in which the applicant has to wait to apply again, or can they never apply again?
It's 1 year. If an application is denied, it cannot be brought back to the board for a period of 1 year unless there are substantial changes to the request. Like if it's a very different request, but it still involves parking, it could come back, before that 1 year expires. But if it was, similar to this one, with just asking for additional parking spaces, it would be a minimum of a year before it can be brought back.
And could you give, I won't hold you to it, I hope the applicant wouldn't either, but how long would it take for the city to get all the players aligned and get new signage up, or is that, are we talking a 6-month or 6-year process?
I would say a matter of months. It could be done by this fall, pretty easily.
Thank you.
Are you asking because you think they should be able to park off street versus having to
I'm struggling with, maybe it's not one in the hand, two in the bush. I'm struggling with, if the city's not supportive and let's say I'm not supportive and I wanted to vote no, but I didn't want to leave the applicant and the community there without a solution. I don't want to say, no, I hope the city changes the streets, but and then if they don't change the streets, they have to wait a year to come back.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of I'll be honest, I don't know if I want to vote on it. I don't know if I want to entertain a motion.
Sure.
Because I don't want to throw, a fly in the ointment, but it seems like there's no guarantee on the other side of a solution.
Well, okay, so I guess one way to look at that is if there was extenuating circumstances and the traffic engineer was not in favor of making changes along that street, which is what we're talking about here tonight, and limiting parking, that could be an extenuating circumstance which the applicant could use to try to come back to the board with another request before that one-year period is up.
Thank you.
But you all would prefer to develop it into a parking lot? Okay.
Until those signs are up on Elvan Road, can people just park there anyways? Or, is the city really going to ticket them?
People can.
Well, parking is legal on both sides of Alvan Road right now. So this talk of restricting the parking to just one side would be to help address concerns raised by other business owners on the street. The one is the maneuvering space for the tractor trailers coming through there would be greatly improved if parking was only on one side of the street. And that would also alleviate vehicles parked directly in front of the insurance business, which is on the south side of Alvan.
Applicant, I'm asking a question. That compounds your problem in your eyes. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Can you all help them develop a parking lot so that that's not a problem? Like give them some funding? Is there a funding available to help them develop the parking lot like you're going to do with the previous applicant because of the planning error?
Well, the difference here is this is outside the bounds of the ordinance as far as allowing additional parking spaces. The other situation dealing with the easement adjacent to the roadway, the city has put forth that as a solution to the problem. The city is not covering the costs of that. In that situation, they've got to have a surveying company put together the easement and submit that to the city. So we just agreed that was the best solution, was to go the easement route versus replatting. But in this particular request we're now talking about, it's added parking spaces that goes against the zoning ordinance.
Not necessarily a funding issue.
It's not.
I know that it's not a funding. I'm just asking because that's like an impediment to their business. They could get support maybe to help them because that's still in alignment with the spirit of the ordinance to support economic vitality. Just asking. I was just asking.
Thank you. I want to just reaffirm my understanding of sequence of events potentially. If the application is denied, the city may or may not take up the project of assessing the street. And if it's left untouched, you're happy, but not as happy as if you got your parking spots on site. And should the city change the current situation on that street, it would be a extenuating circumstance that would allow the applicant to come back in front of the board if they wanted to. Did I hear that right?
The only addition I would make there is, if for some reason parking wasn't limited to one side of the street, there may still be unresolved issues with the freight company and the tractor-trailer traffic coming through there, and they might continue to, support a variance for the off-street parking. so that they don't have to be concerned about, cars on both sides of the street as tractor trailers are going in and out of Alvan.
Do we have any opposition letters?
We do not have any opposition letters. We just had the 2 letters of support.
Okay. Are there additional comments from staff?
Not at this time.
Are there additional questions for the applicant or staff?
For staff, are there any crash data for that stretch of road? Have there been any crashes, pedestrian safety issues because of the on-street parking?
I know there's plenty of crash data for Sprinkle Road, but I did not look at any of that related to, in fact, I didn't look at any crash data, as far as what has occurred in the past at Alvan and Sprinkle there.
And then there's 22 spots there now, and they constructed the building in 2018, 2019. How was it that they were allowed that many spaces when the code allows for 7?
So the former off-street parking standards established a parking minimum, but there was no maximum. So that same calculation of 1 off-street parking space per 330 square feet of gross floor area applied, but there was no cap of 10% above that, which is now in place. So, so that allowed them to add additional parking spaces they thought were necessary to make their business marketable.
Now, the additional lot that you constructed yourselves, that was gravel, correct? What is the city's view on that versus having additional asphalt with drainage issues and maintenance? Gravel seems to be not as big of an issue when it comes to drainage or, ongoing maintenance.
Well, and that's a good question. For smaller parking lots, the public services engineers would allow gravel to be applied, but anytime you have 20 or more parking spaces, it has to be a solid surface and it has to have stormwater management. So, they've already got the 22, so obviously anything more that's added would have to be asphalt or concrete also.
And would there be any process to go around that to allow for gravel?
Well, it'd be, it would have to be approved by Public Services. I don't know what their, if there is even an appeal process, because they have stormwater management standards they follow.
Thank you.
Are there additional questions from the board?
Just as a point of clarification for layout, is this parking lot adjacent to the existing one, or is it across the street? The suggested new parking lot?
It would be adjacent to the existing parking lot.
So in addition to the current?
Yes, so the same access drive coming in off of Alvan Road for the existing parking lot would allow you to pull in and turn and access the additional 10 spaces they're proposing.
I think I would feel more comfortable obtaining more information on alternatives, such as if there's a route to allowing a gravel parking lot that satisfies their needs while minimizing some of the concerns from the city.
I'm a bit outside my element.
Yeah, I mean, the only difficulty from the city standpoint is whether it's asphalt, concrete, or gravel, it's still added parking spaces. I mean, I think I understand what you're getting at, because this is not, this is reducing the environmental impact because it would be gravel versus asphalt. So so it's better in that respect if gravel were to be allowed, but because of the fact that the overall parking lot exceeds the threshold to be gravel. It's going to have to be a solid surface, with the stormwater management.
Very well. If there aren't additional questions, is there a motion for the finding of fact?
Yeah. I move that the finding of facts shall include all information included in the notice of public hearing dated June 29th, 2022, and the agenda packet staff provided for this request at 3650 Alvin Road. 17 notices of public hearing were sent and 2 responses were received. One was a letter of support from Old Dominion Freight Line, Inc. at 3600 Alvan Road. And the other was a letter of support from Modern Woodmen of America at 2700 Sprinkle Road. Tom Farrell, and Aaron Farrell appeared on behalf of the applicant. Applicant owns the property that we're talking about here. It's approximately a 3.5 acre property with a slightly over 2,000 square foot retail building on it. Applicant indicates that they have as many as 700 customers a day and that they have between 12 and 15 employees at peak times on the facility. Applicant indicates that Alvan Road is not a pedestrian-friendly street, that there are not lights or any sort of infrastructure for pedestrians there. When they started to have parking problems, applicant created a self-help solution by creating a gravel parking lot adjacent to their building. When they were informed that that was outside the ordinance, they deconstructed that. Their goal now is to obtain off-street parking in a parking lot that's on their access drive, but across from where their current parking lot is. Alvan Road is off Sprinkle. It is a road that applicant indicates has some significant heavy truck use during the day. Since the gravel parking lot has been deconstructed, applicant indicates that employees have complained about the safety of parking on the street. Applicant has limited its ask to 10 spots, 10 extra parking spots from what they already have. There was much discussion about potential parking solutions and whether the street could be re-signed or limited parking on one side to another to accommodate truck use. And that's it.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. All those in favor of approving the finding of fact, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, the same. The motion of finding of fact has been accepted. Is there a motion regarding this pending application?
Is there discussion?
If there's a motion, then there's discussion. Yes.
I make a motion for the granting of a dimensional variance from Chapter 50-7.2 to allow 32 off-street parking spaces where 7 spaces is the maximum permitted for this retail use.
Might there be a second?
Second.
Thank you. Now the board shall discuss the application where they can express support or opposition.
I have another question. City staff. Pete, so you guys are not in alignment with the off-street parking? Is staff not supportive of additional off-street parking?
That is correct.
Okay, so if staff is not, and that's based on what you've just outlined? Okay.
Yes.
Because you're saying that when you've gone there, you haven't seen all 700 people in there, and you don't think they need it?
Well, not really that specifically, but the fact that the site already has more
Off-street
off-street parking
parking,
spaces
okay.
than the current off-street parking ordinance allows. And that is, that is item one. Item two is the fact that there is the alternative parking along the public street. And even though I know that's not desirable to the applicant, that is, a parking option.
I know, but they don't feel safe. So what was wrong with the gravel parking lot that they made themselves on their property? What was the issue with that?
Well,
I mean, it's not zoning appropriate or compliant, but.
So it added additional parking spaces, which violated the ordinance.
Okay.
And it was constructed without a permit, and those are the two primary items.
But why are y'all stressing them about, if you don't like the off-street parking situation, then what could they do to get a parking lot then? What would they have to do to get a parking lot?
They're doing it.
I want to,
I mean,
this is what this is.
This is their outlet is to request a variance, because looking at the ordinance, there isn't any other option for them to add parking, unless they
So
were.
this is not for additional off-street parking, this is for the parking lot.
Well, this variance would allow for 10 new off-street spaces to be added
To the existing parking
to the
lot.
existing parking lot.
Oh, existing parking lot.
Yes, so-
Not for off-street parking, for the existing parking lot, on their property.
On their property,
Okay.
correct.
Okay,
correct.
I wasn't
Yes,
clear.
so-
Okay, thank
so,
you.
yeah,
I'm clear now.
so this is the relief valve is
Got
requested.
it, okay, well, yeah, I'm fine.
The only other option it would be to add to their building and
Yes,
create enough square
okay.
footage that would allow for more parking space.
Okay, I'm clear now, I'm sorry, thank you.
Other discussion points? Hearing, go please.
Yes. I'm going to be in support of this. I feel that it's a necessity. I would love for Kalamazoo to be more walkable and transit-oriented, but obviously that's not necessarily the case now, especially at that location. So I don't feel comfortable necessarily telling a business they can't expand their parking lot to accommodate customers. So I'll be in support.
I'm going to be in support of this tonight, too. I think there are special circumstances or conditions. Sprinkle Road is one of the least pedestrian-friendly areas I can imagine, right? And this street was named after a trucking company. It seems to me that the status quo solution is unsafe and uncustomer friendly, and I don't know why we would want to do that to a business or to people, using a business in town. I think as soon as this ordinance changed, we granted 2 or 3 variances to increase parking for other businesses in that little Cork, Sprinkle, Alvan area there. I think 2 of them were hotels that didn't even have enough if they had parking if they had full occupancy. I think that the changing of this ordinance, which basically took what was the minimum and turned the minimum plus 10% into the maximum, is having some probably predictable consequences of hurting the businesses and the expectations of people that had bought before that ordinance came into place, built, and then realized that they didn't even have enough after they built in excess of the ordinance. It seems to me it just is common sense to grant this.
Thank you. Are there other comments, support or opposition oriented? Very well. Mr. Eldridge, could I get a roll call vote for this application, or for this motion?
We'll start with Mr. Turpinning.
Go Green Go, yes.
Vanden Hamburg,
Yes.
Lager,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
Harrington,
Yes.
Purdue.
Yes.
The application request has been approved. Have a good night. The board's, Mr. Lager, will you read the next application into the record for Alcott Street?
Yeah, let me get, one moment. Does this start on page, I'm sorry, where is the,
I'll get it for you.
page 67, just found it, thank you. An application for a variance from provisions of the zoning ordinance has been filed with the Zoning Board of Appeals by Hollander Development Corporation of 333 East Alcott Street in the residential multifamily district. The applicant is requesting a dimensional variance from Chapter 50-7.2 to allow 75 off-street parking spaces where 56 is the maximum number of spaces permitted, a variance from the Natural Features Protection Ordinance, and, well, number 2, a variance from the Natural Features Protection Ordinance, Chapter 50, Section 50-6.2G, to allow the removal of 55% of the woodland where 10% is the maximum permitted. Please note that this request will not change the zoning classification of the properties. This is a request for variance only regarding the items described above.
Thank you. Will the applicant please sign in, say your name slowly for us, and then you'll have 10 minutes.
Good evening, board members. My name is Matt Hollander. I'm a resident of Kalamazoo, and I'm also the president of Hollander Development Corporation, which is a business located in Kalamazoo. I'm here this evening only to ask for the parking-related variance that Mr. Lager just read, and Mr. Eldridge, I think, can give some explanation as to why we dropped the second half of the request, and I'm happy to speak on that as well. We are in the process of attempting to develop a 6.64 acre subparcel of 333 East Alcott Street into a multi-unit development, including 48 units of affordable housing. And this evening, we're coming to ask you for a parking variance. We would like to construct 75 parking spaces for those 48 units, while the zoning ordinance would only permit us to construct up to 56 parking spaces. There are two primary reasons why we're making this request. The first is that we aim to seek MSHDA, Michigan State Housing Development Authority, finance on the project. MSHDA has their own standards of design, which in this case would require us to construct 2 parking spaces per unit. We are trying to meet in the middle so as to avoid any potential conflict with MSHDA as we move through the financing process. So as it stands, under the zoning ordinance, we would be permitted to construct 1.17 spaces per unit approximately. We're seeking to construct 1.56 spaces per unit. The second reason for this request is that we do not feel that the parking requirements associated with the RM24 multi-unit district are consistent with the unit mix that we intend to construct on this property. This is intended to be affordable housing for families, and our goal, which is not set in stone at this point, but our design goal is to have approximately 75% of the units as 2- and 3-bedroom units that would have more occupants on average than some of the studio and 1-bedroom units that have been more commonly developed in recent years. So number one, We think MISHDA is going to give us problems as we move through the financing process if we go with the ordinance. Number two, we think we actually do need additional parking spaces because these would be some of the only 2- and 3-bedroom affordable housing units to come online in Kalamazoo in some time. The other circumstances on the site are that we have 48 units on 6.64 acres. In the RM24 zoning district, that permits us to construct approximately 24 units per acre. If we were to maximize the number of units that we were allowed under RM24, we could construct up to 160 units of housing on this site. So as it stands with the site plan that's included in your packet tonight, we have a light footprint on the site, in our opinion. We have an abundance of green space, and we are also going to be focusing on multimodal transportation. So a portion of our project is that we're seeking to complete a spur of the Kalamazoo River Valley Trail that runs along the Portage Creek on the west side of the site. We would also seek to establish a bus stop at the development serving those 48 units. And with the multimodal transportation pathway that gives great access for walking, biking, skateboarding, et cetera. We would also be completing sidewalks along the east side of the site along Belford Street where they do not currently exist. And so we would be completing the sidewalks that surround the property on Reed, Belford, and Bryant, and adding some additional options for pedestrians. The second portion of the request, which we are no longer making related to tree cover on the property, we found after we hired a third-party consultant that we did not in actuality meet the definition of woodland under the natural features protection overlay. And when we went to the NFP board, they agreed with us, which Mr. Eldridge I think can attest to. And so we, at this point, will be meeting all requirements of NFP in terms of the Portage Creek waterway, the setbacks, the requirements associated with that. We'll be protecting some special status trees that we've identified on the property during the construction period, and we'll be taking care of those in the long term if we can move forward with the project. And that is all I have for you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for the applicant?
What, why, can you go over a little bit more, like, what happened with that 55% woodland issue? Like, it's not, why is that no longer a concern for the board?
I can
Speak to
cover
that.
that. So, yeah, so it was thought at the time of the application, and that's why there was already materials in the packet, that natural features protection variance was applicable to this development, and the packet was put together before the June 28th Natural Features Protection Review Board meeting. And at that meeting on the 28th, the detailed information that was presented covering sorry, I'm just reading off the letter that was sent out, but detailed information was provided showing evidence of the trees on the property and how it was clear they did not meet the definition of woodland under the Natural Features Protection Ordinance. So therefore, that was the determination made by the Natural Features Protection Board that, you know, that a variance was not applicable, and so therefore, you know, that item was removed as far as what you're having to rule on tonight. Does that clarify it?
Yeah, but I'm going to ask you a question later. Thank you.
Any more questions? Please.
Mr. Hollander, I didn't understand that part. It's a 6-some acre site, and if you wanted to, I know that's not your goal, but if you wanted to maximize the number of units there, you could build how many per acre?
Per acre, approximately 24.
24.
The RM24 zoning designation requires 1,800 square feet, Mr. Eldridge is correct, 1,800 square feet per dwelling unit of site area.
Okay.
And so if we apply that to 6.64 acre site, it would allow us up to 160.
So if you were to maximize the number of units by right, you could have more parking spaces than you're asking for tonight. All right.
Could we confirm the podium mic is on? For those people at home. Thank you.
Is it working now, sir?
Yes, thank you. Other questions for the applicant?
Yes, so you're asking for 75 off-street parking spaces. What is MISHDA's requirement?
MISHA's requirement for a family.
Okay.
Hearing no other questions for the applicant, I thank you. You can be seated.
Thank you.
Now, those in favor are welcome to speak at the podium. It's a quiet night. Those opposed are welcome to speak at the podium. Getting quieter. All righty. Mr. Eldridge, do you have comments on this one? Oh, call in people. Thanks. Mr. Eldridge?
Yeah, I do have a few comments to make, and looking at the review criteria, we indicated under special circumstances, the difference between the MISHDA parking standards and the city's zoning ordinance parking requirements. And the reason for that is this is a project, one of very few that is being put forth for funding through MISHDA for low-income housing, what we call low-income housing tax credits. Now, I know to this board it may seem like there must be a whole bunch of these projects because you just had the Mount Zion housing project before you last month, and there was a parking variance for that senior housing development, and that is also a project going to MISHDA. But in reality, there are not many of these projects, and because of the fact that funding from the state is dependent on them meeting certain development standards set by MISHDA, it places the developer in a difficult situation to try to meet both the city ordinance and the MISHDA standards. And obviously the city is supportive of a project like this as it brings additional low-income housing to our community. So I just wanted to add a little background on that and why you've now seen two requests in a row that are dealing with parking and are related to a project that is going forth to MISHDA for low-income housing tax credits. Other items of note, indeed, this is a little different than many other apartment complexes because of the high number of 2- and 3-bedroom units proposed, which inevitably will lead to a greater parking demand because you'll have larger occupant counts in those units. So that is another element of significance. And lastly, this is a project that, again, it's another brownfield site that the city has been working for years to complete the cleanup in coordination with the state and allow for redevelopment, which that day is now, is in the near future as projects like this come forward. So, it is a benefit to the Edison neighborhood as it brings more housing. It's a win from the standpoint that this is another brownfield site that is being put back into active use. So with all those reasons, staff is supportive of the dimensional variance request.
Thank you.
Is it you want to develop 48 units, right? Okay, thanks.
Does the board have any additional questions before we establish the finding of fact? Very well. Is there a motion for the finding of fact?
I move that the finding of fact shall include all information included in the notice of public hearing dated June 29th, 2022, and the agenda packet staff provided for the request at 333 East Alcott Street. 125 notices of public hearing were sent and 0 responses were received. A public hearing was held before the board, public comments were accepted, and there were no voice messages. In addition to all of the things that I've just mentioned, the finding of facts will also include the following. The facts presented regarding circumstances or conditions of the property or structures that are special circumstances or conditions not commonly found on, other lots or structures in the same zone district that make this request unique, or that the applicants are requesting a dimensional variance that allow for 75 off-street parking spaces where 56 is the maximum permitted. This is because they are hoping, the special circumstances are that the applicable city ordinances have a minimum parking standard and it conflicts with the MSHDA design standard requirement. The facts presented regarding whether or not the applicant is denied rights enjoyed by other property owners in the same zoning district by the applicant ordinances are although the property is zone RM24, well, that doesn't matter anymore. How am I doing? Am I doing okay with this?
Fabulous.
I don't think that matters because I was going to address the issue of the natural features protection. I think I kind of addressed it. The Matt Hollander from Hollander Development, came before the board, and special circumstances include that there are 2 to 3 bedroom, more 2 to 3 bedroom units that are going to be developed at this property, which are going to require them to need more parking spaces, and it's not consistent. The current design standard is not consistent with the unit mix. And I want to say that it's 75% of the units that you're going to be developing are 2 to 3 bedrooms. Is that accurate? That's their goal. They are developing with the light footprint at this site, and they're also incorporating multimodal transportation pathways. They could develop up to 160 units of housing, and at this point, they are only developing 48 units of affordable housing. They would like to establish this establish a bus stop at this property, and they have a total of approximately 6.64 acres. And that is my finding of fact.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Is there going to be a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Now we shall have a discussion period where members can express their support or opposition.
I'll be in support, and I'm really excited about the multimodal transit orientation of this. So I think that's fantastic.
I agree, and I was going to be super stressed about that 55%. I'm happy that's not on the table, so I'm really happy about this.
Administrator Eldridge?
Mr. Chair, we're still doing finding of fact, right?
My
Yeah.
apologies.
No, that's all right, that's
Thank
all right.
you.
It's been a long meeting, but yeah, this is just finding of facts, so all you need is the voice vote.
Thank you. I was off base. So we have a second on the finding of fact. All those in favor of approving the motion for finding of fact, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, the same. We have approved the motion of finding of fact. Now, might there be a motion regarding this application?
I make a motion for the granting of a dimensional variance from Chapter 50-7.2 to allow 75 off-street parking spaces where 56 is the maximum number of spaces permitted.
Thank you. Is there going to be a second?
Second.
Thank you. We've heard two comments of support. Are there additional board opposition or support comments or discussion? Very well. Mr. Eldridge, could I have a roll call vote?
We'll start with Harrington,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
Lager,
Yes.
Vanden Hamburg,
Yes.
Herpening,
Yes.
Purdue.
Yes.
Your request has been approved. Thank you. Have a good night. Mr. Lager, could you read the final application into the record?
Yes, an application for a variance from provisions of the zoning ordinance has been filed with the Zoning Board of Appeals by Sign Art, Inc. on behalf of Consumers Credit Union for 3110 Oakland Drive in the Commercial Neighborhood District. The applicant is requesting a dimensional variance from Appendix A, Chapter 7, Section 7.3 to allow a 128-square-foot freestanding sign along the Oakland Drive frontage where the maximum sign area permitted is 100 square feet. A dimensional variance, and two, a dimensional variance from Appendix A, Chapter 7, Section 7.2D to allow a 28% changeable copy portion of the freestanding sign where 25% is the maximum permitted. Please note that this request will not change the zoning classification of the properties. This is a request for variance only regarding the items described above.
Thank you. Will the applicant step to the podium, sign in, and provide your name slowly for us? You'll have 10 minutes.
Sure. My name is Steve Vander Sloot, and I am with Sign Art, and I am here on behalf of Consumers Credit Union. There's probably nothing more I'd rather do than be at the Zoning Board of Appeals meeting on
Join the club.
8:45. So I'll make it short and sweet. This is a pretty similar circumstance to what we had a few months ago for Hamilton Law. It's an interesting time these days in trying to stay in front of the curve of construction processes, construction materials, lead times, and so I had to twist Mr. Eldridge's arms to get this on the agenda tonight, knowing that this is a full agenda. But the reasoning is very simple. We're just trying to make sure that we can deliver the identification to consumers on time with the construction schedule, even though this project started probably 7 years ago, maybe, is when they first acquired the property. So they're pretty excited, and they're ready to move to forward with the retail component and market the retail component. And it's hard for them to make promises on signage, which is a big deal, especially for the type of retailers that are going to be in that small strip center, oddly positioned strip center. So I pushed to have it here tonight. So I appreciate your time, and I hope the application and the staff report clearly reflects what the intention is. It's simply just to move the items forward early rather than wait for the ordinance to be updated. And if I can answer any questions,
So just, like, I guess it's not even devil's advocate, 28 square feet of additional signage, 100 to 128. I mean, what do I picture as 28 square feet? That is not a large area.
I mean, a sheet of plywood's, 4 by 8, 32 square feet. There's a couple things that go into the selection. Unfortunately, you can't just make the digital display any size you want. You have to work within 1 foot increments. And we also like a specific proportion, height to width. And then lastly, we're trying to be consistent with other displays that they have throughout Southwest Michigan to, again, to be able to carry over the same message from one location to the next. So it was really, it's a balancing act between the digital, what's available, their logo, and then satisfying the various proportions for the commercial tenants as well as the identification. So there's no magic formula other than the digital display came out at 4 foot by 9 foot.
Okay.
Is the digital display necessary for their business?
What's that now?
Is, you may not be able to answer this question because the owner is not here, but is a digital sign necessary for their business?
They find it to be. There's very few locations that they do not have a digital, and the ones you would think would be where simply they physically don't have the space for it, like the location on the Kalamazoo Mall. They're part of an inline retail development in Gaines Township that's not conducive to it because there's a huge clear vision drainage basin.
How about Costco?
Oh yeah, they have one.
They have one there?
Yeah, very similar proportion to what's here.
I'm sad to say this to you, the sign guy. These things don't work. I live right there. I'm sorry for you. I go by there 3 times a day and I couldn't, and I should disclose now, I am a member of the bank, but I do not feel like I have any conflicts of interest. I'm a member there. I couldn't tell you they have a digital A sign at all.
Well, I think that to some degree, I'm doing my job because it's not obnoxious that way.
I appreciate it.
One of
Thank
the
you.
things that we're very careful when we do these things is actually I don't let these go out the door without being dimmed down to an acceptable level. We also do ambient lighting testing after the sign's installed, and we advise them when those get out of parameters based on their backgrounds. So quite frankly, I think that's really a good thing if you're not noticing a digital display, because most people, I shouldn't say most people, people that are object to them are usually offended by the brightness, the change, and how the information is presented. So they do a very nice job. It's highly professionally organized, professionally run, professionally programmed. It's definitely a part of their overall marketing plan, though.
Cool. I have a second question that is, I may have heard it, and you may or may not know, but how many suites are going to be at this development?
I believe there are 4 retail spaces at the ground level. There are 3 single, what would you characterize it? Apartments, condos?
Yeah, apartments, 3 apartments on the second floor.
On the second floor, and then you have the commercial element of the bank itself, and they do have offices upstairs. It's a pretty active site, along with the drive-through lane and the pedestrian gathering point right on the corner. That was a pretty big deal through the site development process with city staff.
Let's say they had a 2,400 square foot suite and they had 2 tenants that needed 1,200 and they ended up having a 5th suite. How would that 5th suite get a sign on this sign?
Well, that's a really good question, and it's hard to deal in hypotheticals because I think that's a problem that consumers would love to have. And I think what they would consider doing then is either offering them advertising space on the digital component, which is the easiest solution, or they could even potentially expand the other sign that's on Parkview. They could add a retail space on that sign because that's well undersized as to what could be placed there.
And this one's oversized because of the digital?
Pretty much, yep. It's, well, oversized by current ordinance, yes.
Got it.
By the ordinance that's, in process, it's going to be well undersized.
Getting back to the square footage visual concept here. As I'm looking at this sign, can you tell me, is one of the smaller tenant signs the amount of the overage, or is it the Wood Lakes strip? Can you kind of put into context?
Well, kind of like what I alluded to before, we're working within, we start with kind of a balancing act, but number one priority is to identify concerns correctly, obviously.
We have a mic challenge.
Do it consistently, yes.
Thank you.
It really is, there's a number of elements to it that add to the square footage. We have decorative reveals. We have, we don't have to put a Woods Lake Square at the top, but most people like a destination name at the top of the development itself in addition to the retail piece. So it's a number of contributing factors.
Got it. Thank you.
That make it challenging.
Thank you.
Yep.
So it's 1 foot by 9 feet. There's 9 feet. So if I'm looking at the mock-up, the Woods Lake is about 15 inches by 9 feet. So we're approaching, was that about 17 square feet for the Woods Lake Square portion? I'm just trying to get a visual on how large is the overage request. Thank you. Are there other questions for the applicant?
I have a question for a point of clarification. Steve, I've got that it's, you've got 4 retail spaces on the ground with 3 apartments on the second floor, and then the third floor, there's office space. Is that correct?
I believe there's office space within the retail branch, not the secondary building that is towards the back of the property.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Please.
staff would just like to clarify that a question, a little side question was raised by Ms. Harrington. Just, she wasn't sure what the next steps were and the standards that we're talking about tonight apply to the proposed sign regulations, the amendments that are being prepared to present to the Planning Commission. So what is being talked about does align with those proposed sign amendments.
That's pretty important information. Thank you.
But I didn't want to be out of school, so I just wanted to clarify with
understand.
staff.
Thank
So,
you.
yeah, thank you.
You'll notice that the sign is 18 feet tall. That is not by mistake. That is, again, what's going to be under the new sign ordinance as well. So we actually started at 20, that magic number, and reduced it so that it was one less. So really, once code's enacted, it will be considered a conforming sign at that point.
Are there other questions? Thank you.
Sure.
Those that would like to speak in favor of the application are welcome to speak at the podium. As well, those opposed are welcome at the podium. And those who call over the phone are welcome.
No callers at this time.
Administrator Eldridge, do you have comments?
Yes, I do have a few comments, and just to clarify these 2 requests. So the applicant, as mentioned, and the reason that Mr. Vandersloot from Sign Art is familiar with our proposed sign ordinance amendments is because they've been put out for public comment for quite some time now, and we intentionally sent those drafts to a number of local sign companies for them to provide us feedback. So, he's quite well acquainted with what's proposed. And as I've mentioned to the board, that is something we are moving forward. It is complicated. In fact, Attorney Bear recently had to write an opinion on a court case related to billboards and how the Supreme Court ruled on the definition of off-premises signs. So, we are in the process of, we've crafted ordinance amendments that fit the needs of our community. At the same time, we've looked at case law and tried to make sure that we are moving in the direction of what's considered content neutral, where the focus is more on regulating the time and place and manner of how signage is used. So it's a little different than some of the other ordinance amendments we've moved forward because of the commercial speech and the legal ramifications. So the long and short of it is, what you're seeing here is in the proposed ordinance amendments, we are increasing the size of freestanding signs for developments such as this. For those of you that have been on the board for any length of time, you've seen these monument signs for these multi-tenant developments come forward over and over again because the standard allowance based on the street frontage is really hard to utilize to cover a multi-tenant development. So we intentionally increased the square footage. So what would be allowed as a maximum for this freestanding sign on this Oakland Drive frontage is 150 square feet. The applicant is before us with 128 square feet, so it's actually less than what the new maximum will be. The applicant is also proposing an 18-foot tall sign, which is the new height. The current standard is 20 feet, so the sign will actually be shorter than other signs that you see in that zone district. But we felt that height wasn't necessary, but the additional square footage was. And then as far as the changeable copy, that has been a difficult match, as Mr. Vandersloot mentioned. There's only certain sizes they make those LED panels in. So when you're looking at a sign ordinance that says your cap is 25% of the overall sign area for your LED display or changeable copy, it makes it difficult to design the sign. So we are changing that standard to 50% of the sign area. And this is a fine example. The standard is 50%. The applicant has presented a proposal for 28%. So again, it's less than what the new maximum will be. So I wanted to put that in context. And then to, I will jump right to the special circumstances. And that really is, because of the complexity of what we're trying to move forward, it has caused delays. And at the same time, the applicant, as mentioned, is dealing with circumstances in their industry of material shortages, delays on manufacturing, and the need to have an answer to this, the sign allowance, so that prospective tenants know what they're going to be allowed to display out front for their advertisement if they sign a lease, for one of these spaces. So there's the material shortages and the lead time to manufacture a sign. There's the need to have an answer to what signage is allowed for this site, for marketing of the site, for new tenants. So, so those are really the special circumstances that I wanted to lay out, in addition to what we've gone through as staff trying to move the sign amendments forward. And I hope that clarifies for the board, the situation. There was one correspondence received from a Margaret Carr on Parkview Avenue. She lives in the Woods Harbor condo, and she just expressed some concern about, the need for for a freestanding sign when the building's already so close to the road. She also indicated that it seemed like there was a lot of things being constructed, near the property frontage that may impede, drivers' viewpoints. They're comments related to the development of this site, but not, directly related to, the two sign variances before the board tonight. But I do want to mention that was received. And, with that being said, staff is in support of both of the variances. As I mentioned, they will, fall in line with the sign regulation amendments that are proposed.
Thank you. Does the board have any additional questions before the finding of fact is established? Very well. Is somebody going to make a motion for the finding of fact?
I move that the finding of facts shall include all information included in the notice of public hearing dated June 29th of 2020 and the agenda packet staff provided for this request at 3110 Oakland Drive. 34 notices of public hearing were sent and one response was received. They are as follows. An email opposition was received from Margaret Carr at 2210 Parkview Avenue. In addition to all of the things I have just mentioned, the finding of facts will also include the following. Steve Vandersloot from Sign Art Incorporated on behalf of Consumers Credit Union is requesting two-dimensional variances. The first variance is to allow for a 128-foot sign along Oakland Drive where the maximum at this time is 100 feet. The second variance requested is to allow for a 28% changeable copy portion of the sign where currently 25% is the maximum permitted. Mr. Vandersloot mentioned the following and a discussion ensued. Regarding the special circumstances of the credit union property, number one, looking to expedite the brand identification for Consumers Credit Union. Sign Art has been working with the city, as has Consumers Credit Union, for 7+ years to remarket this property at this location. They're looking to include a bank and retail businesses on the property along the lines of 4 retail offices at the ground level and 3 apartments on the second floor to include a pedestrian gathering point. Is digital sign necessary? Yes. Similar sign is what is at Costco. They're taking great care to have the digital signs be less obnoxious. Dimming features, with regard to the minimum action that could be taken, there was some discussion regarding smaller signage, discussion about the Woods Lake square name at the top. Really, at the end of the day, one of the big issues is that everything that Sign Art is doing in conjunction to market the property for Consumers Energy is that the initiatives the city is taking to have these new signage amendments and ordinances, what Sign Art is proposing is well within the boundaries of the new requirement, and in some cases, smaller. And I conclude.
Thank you. Thank you. Now we shall have a discussion period. Board members can express support or opposition.
Do we have second for the finding of fact?
You want to be chairman?
I second that.
All those in favor of accepting the motion of finding of fact, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, the same. The motion of finding of fact has been accepted. Is there a motion regarding the application?
I make a motion to grant a dimensional variance from Appendix A, Chapter 7, Section 7.3 to allow a 128-square-foot freestanding sign along the Oakland Drive frontage where the maximum sign area permitted is 100 feet. And I'm just going to do the one motion at a time and then the second, if that's all right.
Thank you. Is there a second for the first motion in this?
I second.
Thank you. Mr. Eldridge, could I get a roll call vote on the first motion?
We'll start with Purdue,
Yes.
Harrington,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
Lager,
Yes.
Vanden Hamburg,
Yes.
Turpinning.
Yes.
The first variance request has been approved.
I make a motion for a dimensional variance from Appendix A, Chapter 7, Section 7.2D to allow a 28% changeable copy portion of the freestanding sign where 25% is the maximum permitted.
Will there be a second?
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Eldridge, a roll call vote, please.
We'll start with Mr. Turpinning,
Yes.
Vanden Hamburg,
Yes.
Lager,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
Harrington,
Yes.
Purdue.
Yes.
Your second variance request has been approved. Have a good evening. Are there any other discussion or agenda items?
There's no more, no additional items of discussion this evening.
Thank you very much. Hearing no other discussion, I'll adjourn the meeting at 9:12 p.m.
You did it. You gavelled.